Hi, I'm Dave Stoneback, Director of Utilities for the City of Evanston. I'm here to welcome you to our water quality laboratory at the water treatment facility. The lab is a critical part of our treatment process. The lab is staffed by a chemist, a microbiologist, and our 5 water treatment plant operators in the filtration section. The lab is utilized 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and some of the testing is done once an hour. The lab is utilized to monitor the quality of the lake or raw water to determine the proper chemical dosage to allow for the most effective treatment of water. The level of cloudiness or particulate matter in the water, commonly referred to as turbidity, is measured along with pH, temperature, alkalinity, and hardness of the raw water. Based on this information, the lab staff determines the appropriate level of coagulants to add to the water to begin the treatment process. The turbidity of the water is also checked in the middle of the treatment process to ensure that the process is working appropriately. Finally, the turbidity of the finished or potable water is checked to make sure that all large particles that could harbor potentially harmful pathogens have been removed. The turbidity standard for finished water is to have a turbidity of less than 0.3 NTU in 95% of your samples and no samples exceeding 1 NTU. The finished water leaving the Evanston treatment facility has an average turbidity of 0.08 NTU, well below the required standard. The other major factor in water treatment is maintaining an appropriate chlorine residual. Chlorine is added as a disinfectant to neutralize any pathogens that might be in the water. The chlorine residual is monitored on a continuous basis using inline analyzers at both the beginning of the treatment process and in the finished water. The lab staff confirms these readings by testing samples from both of these sites on an hourly basis. Testing for turbidity and maintaining an appropriate chlorine residual are considered to be the 2 most important parameters in providing safe drinking water. The water quality lab also tests samples of the finished water to determine the level of fluoride and phosphate. In accordance with state law, fluoride is added to the water to help promote good dental health. The lab performs testing to make sure that the level of fluoride in the water is within the concentration range established by the state. Phosphate is added to the water to inhibit lead and copper corrosion, minimizing the level of these metals in the water. The phosphate forms a thin coating on the inside of the lead and copper pipes used in buildings to prohibit the water from coming in contact with the metal materials, thus limiting the concentration of these metals in the water. The lab staff also performs microbiological monitoring using the membrane filter process. Microbiological monitoring is completed on samples from 4 different phases of the treatment process, twice per day. In addition, a minimum of 80 samples are collected from various locations throughout the city and analyzed to ensure that the water in the distribution system is safe. With me is Kevin Lucas, the Assistant Superintendent of Water Production for the treatment plant. He's going to demonstrate some of the tests that are performed in the lab and give an explanation of the equipment utilized here.
Thanks, Dave. We'll move right along. We're taking a look now at the sampling sink that we use to monitor all phases of the water treatment process. As you can see, these 2 are actually raw water at our intakes and at the wells, coming right out of the lake. This is right after we've added all the chemicals in what's called our flash mix. This is water that is just entering the filters prior to the filtration process. This is the combined effluent after we have filtered all the water, and this is a tap sample, which is actually out on Lincoln Avenue to mimic a tap that is just like in someone's home. Now, before anybody gets too concerned, please note that all of this water is not down a sewer. It goes back to the front of the treatment plant, and it is retreated again, so we are very sustainable here when it comes to water. Right now we're taking a look at the inline turbidimeters that we use to monitor the treatment process. You take a look here, this is the raw water turbidity, and turbidity is measured in NTU, as Dave mentioned, and that stands for nephelometric turbidity units, which really means the cloudiness or the particulate matter in the water. As you can see, the raw water turbidity is a little bit just under 21 NTUs. Now, after we add chemicals in the flash mix, coagulants, etc., and let the water settle out, we then measure the turbidity again. We call that the filter influent. As you can see, the turbidity has gone from 21 down to 1.74 NTU, which is a huge drop in a very short period of time. After the water leaves the settling basins, it goes through all of our filters. We have 24 sand filters. We are a conventional treatment process using conventional sand and anthracite, which is coal, filtration processes. You can see that at that point, the effluent leaving the filters is between 0.059 and 0.060, and then the very last one on your right is the actual tap sample, and it again is identical to the effluent at 0.060 NTUs. With us here today in the lab is Al Diaz-Mazaredo. He's our microbiologist, and he is preparing the plates that we use to test for total coliform bacteria. Right now, we are watching our microbiologist, Al, perform the membrane filtration test. He's putting a 0.45 micron filter into the filter assembly and then adding 100 mLs of sample to be analyzed. The filter assembly is rinsed with lab pure deionized water as soon as the sample has gone through the funnel. And at this time, Al will then remove the filter and place it onto the media dish for later incubation. He is currently performing these tests as part of the control samples that we do each day here at the laboratory. As you just saw, Al put the samples that are being run right now into the incubator where they will be incubated for 24 hours. Earlier, you saw him making up the M-endo plates, which is what we use to monitor and test for total coliform, and they are now stored here in the refrigerator. What we're looking at now is the incubator we use to test the water for taste and odors. We do this on a daily basis in order to ensure that the water is odor-free. Keep in mind that all of the record keeping involved with these particular instruments need to be maintained and kept very closely and are part of the audit and the process from which the lab is certified by the Illinois Department of Public Health. I wanted to point out the certification we have from the Illinois Department of Public Health. This is the audit that we've referred to several times to members of council and the residents of the city of Evanston. Our lab has received a score of 2 times in a row with 0 deviations, so a perfect score in 2007 and again in 2009. It is very rare for a lab to achieve a rating of 0 deviations once, let alone twice. So our chemist, Al Diaz-Mazaredo, and our laboratory supervisor and chemist, Eleanor Mead, are to be commended for the efforts that they put forth to maintain laboratory compliance. The lab does not have all the equipment necessary to perform many other tests that are required by the Safe Drinking Water Act. Since the water treatment facility provides water to over 360,000 people, it's considered to be a large water supply facility. As such, we are required not only to test for the presence of inorganic, synthetic organic, and volatile organic contaminants required by the Act, but also test for potential future parameters such as cryptosporidium as required by the long-term 2 surface water rule and 25 additional compounds as required by the unregulated contaminant monitoring rule. The US EPA requires larger supplies such as Evanston to test for the presence of these compounds to determine what compounds will be regulated in the future and establish an appropriate contaminant level for them should they become a required chemical parameter. The lab staff is responsible for collecting these samples for these tests, as well as the record keeping, chain of custody, and reporting of the test results to the state of Illinois. In all, Evanston's finished water is tested for over 100 quality parameters by an outside lab that the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency has certified as an approved lab for this type of testing. We are pleased to announce that the presence of all 100 parameters were non-detectable in the Evanston finished water.
In closing, we want to assure the residents of Evanston and those in our wholesale water supply communities that the staff at the Evanston Water Division is committed to providing safe, potable drinking water. Thank you.